Hey, everybody, welcome to the Gateway to Grace call. My name's Elizabeth Tobin, and each month I do these free repatternings where we look at relationships through the lens of our family patterns. And today I was thinking about intimacy in relationships and how, when we're in relationship, particularly when we're in a partner relationship, there are little choices that we make each day, each moment that either bring us into closer connection or bring us away from connection. And sometimes these choices that we make, we're not really even conscious that we're doing these choices, that we're making these choices. And each little choice in and of itself may not be significant. However, over the course of a relationship, those choices turn into patterns and can set the pattern of interaction in the relationship and actually have very significant ripples, impacts into how our relationship is, into the quality of the relationship that we experience. And so, looking at intimacy, really, when I was thinking, what is intimacy? And it's emotional connection, and it's also being able to be yourself in the relationship with all that that means, and also receiving your partner as they are, allowing them to be themselves. And there are different facets of qualities that intersect with intimacy, right? So in order to feel that emotional connection and to be able to be yourself in the relationship, I know for me, an important piece of that is to feel safe with the person, with myself, to feel secure, to feel comfortable, to feel that I can be seen, right? So there's that piece of vulnerability that comes in. And a lot of this comes from within ourselves. How much are we willing to be open, vulnerable? How much are we willing to risk? And I was thinking about this today in terms of my own history. Um, some of you may know that I lost my mother very quickly when I was 5 years old. It was a very quick diagnosis. Like in 3 weeks, she went from being diagnosed with leukemia to passing away. And that was a huge shock, obviously, not just for me, but for everybody else in the family. And how my family dealt with that has impacted me, of course, in my life and in how I relate to others in relationship. And one of the things that my family did, which is part of my family patterns, is to be stoic, right? Kind of just, rally around, do what you need to do to make it through each day, and attend to sort of, the physical details of life. My father was left, with a bunch of kids, so obviously he's reeling from the experience. The kids are reeling from we're reeling from the experience. And also my grandmother stepped in, my aunt stepped in, and all of them really did come together as a family unit to support us in the way that they knew how to do, which was how do we how do we move forward and sort of make this extremely shocking, traumatic, life-shattering event. How do we normalize it so that we can sort of get through going to school each day, going to work each day, getting dinner on the table each day? And there was, emphasis on that, but there was an emphasis on the emotional fallout from that experience. And so from that very stoic modeling that I saw in the adults around me, I learned how to move into action, take care of physical needs, how to take care of myself at a very young age. But yet, what was modeled for me was not the emotional piece, right? And so I got the feeling that the unspoken message that feelings and needs were not really welcome in this environment. And so, how do I express my grief, my anger, my shock? Even how do I express, what I need in any given moment, my sadness, right? So that wasn't modeled to me. And so obviously that's going to carry through my entire life into my other relationships. And as an adult, oftentimes in relationship, there's a sense of feeling alone. There's this aloneness because there isn't that emotional connection that every human being needs in order to really thrive. And so my challenge is how do I create that in my adult relationships? How do I retrain, repattern, right? And luckily, I know how to repattern those imprints that happened in my childhood that said, emotions are kind of, secondary. We don't really focus on the emotions. And so I think a lot of people experience that same kind of challenge. Like, how do we connect with each other in a real, authentic, intimate way when many times as children, our needs in that regard, our emotional needs were not attended to, and perhaps were not even welcomed. And there's another piece to that as well, which is, so that was sort of, my experience, the immediate experience in the family. And yet there's a whole history going back into the generational line, right? This experience with the death of my mother and how my family handled that, it didn't just arise in that moment. It arose out of the generational patterns that got passed down through the family. And I was also thinking about that in terms of Like, how do we exclude ourselves from our relationships? In family constellations work, there's this concept of the excluded family member. And I can see that in my generational line. And I think most people, um, if you know anything about your family history, you could probably point to that as well. And one of the major aspects of the excluded family member is, um, like, somebody is not given their place in the family, or somehow loses their place in the family. And this can be conscious, it could be an intentional decision. I mean, we see this in highly religious families where somebody marries outside of the faith, and then that family member gets cut off, right? That's an obvious. But also in my family, um, sudden death or a traumatic loss can also cause somebody to be excluded from the family system. So what happens is the shock and the pain of that early death or that sudden loss is so great that the other family members, the surviving family members, aren't equipped to deal with it. And so they kind of like did what my family did. You just focus on moving forward in life without really sort of attending to the emotional aspect of the trauma that has occurred in the family. And so people can get excluded because their memory is so painful for the surviving family members. Another way that an excluded family member could be, is somebody emigrates to a new land. And so they have literally, physically left their place in the family system to move to a new country. And that pattern of being, now they're in a new country, so now they're sort of, they're not included in in their family of origin by physical geographic distance, and now they're also an outsider in their new community, in their new country, until they're able to assimilate. And so if you think about, that one, I think is actually pretty common and can explain a lot of why people in their present relationships feel disconnected, or they don't feel included, or even if they're with people they love, they still feel alone, because that family pattern of being the excluded family member on the unconscious level can still be reverberating and sending ripples through the family line. And then we unconsciously sort of move into resonance with that pattern, and we may exclude ourselves in different ways, so that when love and connection, companionship, intimacy are available, we may not even be able to really fully engage with it. There may be, those little choices that we make each day along the way that bring us away from intimacy rather than opening towards intimacy. So I just want to take a pause and just sort of sit with that a moment. And I'm just going to ask you to to just contemplate, in what way might you be excluding yourself from having the kinds of relationships that you'd really love to have? And if there's something that that's come up for you that you can share, that would be great as we move into our repatterning here. Yeah, Cheryl.
I think I'm protecting myself. There's some kind of protection that protecting myself from being hurt. It's like every relationship I've ever been in, I've been hurt. So I'm protecting myself on some way by excluding myself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Anybody else? Ah, Shelby, I've been excluded as a butch lesbian. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
yeah, yeah. And so you have a very real experience of people excluding you. And yet there may also be
Yeah.
something internally within yourself.
I haven't really been in an intimate relationship for like 29 years, and I don't feel I can let anybody in
Yeah, yeah,
because I don't feel like I'm fully lined up with who I am. And how can people see me if I'm not lined up completely with who I am? And in this society, it's kind of interesting to figure out who you are.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I s- I I see that you're right. Like if I don't know who I am, how can I let somebody in? Because how can I show them who I am if I don't know who that is?
Yeah, and I was definitely excluded from my parents. They definitely didn't even like answer my questions. They just ignored me. It was incredibly strange, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I wanted to be an artist, photographer, and they wanted me to marry some straight Jewish doctor. It was just totally different places. And so I'm just starting to figure it out because I'm showing my art from the 80s when I fully expressed myself. And it's having all kinds of stuff come up for me because it's like when people see me, what do they see? And then they see what I show and what am I showing? So I'd like to integrate this repatterning to really show my highest self as truly loving me and unbreaking these patterns.
yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, Leanne.
Yeah. I just put my higher self in a relationship for a good 10, 11 months and developed a strong friendship after everything. And then I get a really curved ball by writing instead of calling me. And my point is I'm having the nerve to speak up because that's power. And I just said, in terms of your delivery of the curveball has put a huge hole in our once strong friendship. And that got his attention. Now, my point being is in the past, I'd ignore and maybe run because it'd be painful to have a conversation. But I'm going to use my voice and my power and who I am to feel better about what happened, because he has been inappropriate in the way he's done things. So my point is, if you can speak your truth in any way, it helps. Because I didn't do anything wrong, you know?
Yeah. 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 And that goes back also to what Shelby was saying in terms of, like, first you have to know your truth in order to speak it. Right.
Yeah, well, it hasn't come easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're evolving all the time. And so, what is true for us in one stage of relationship may change or evolve.
Yeah, but I'm challenging him to be a decent human being and communicate in the right way. So it's okay to challenge someone because they haven't treated you properly.
Yeah. So setting a boundary and stating a need.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's risk in that. And that's where the vulnerability comes in. Right.
But yes, but being older now, there's a lot more risk in holding it in.
Exactly.
Because it just festers in your being. So
Yep.
So
Right.
today's a challenging day, but that's okay. Not every day's gonna be.
Right.
And, and it's, yes, I will speak up for my true self and who I am and what I've done and not be mistreated.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you came into the group so we can hold and support you today.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Thank you. Yeah. Tisha, I see you had your hand up, and then Cheryl, I see you have your hand up too.
So for exclusion, I can see it in a few ways in my family. The one that comes to mind is on my dad's side of the family, up until the last few years, they always said that we had French, and then it turns out it was Mexican heritage, and so there's the exclusion of a whole like culture. And then on my dad's side of the family, I was excluded because my dad's a pastor and my beliefs didn't align with his. And then on my mom's side of the family, I was excluded because I wouldn't pick sides when my other sibling was getting tag teamed and excluded. So it just goes all across the board.
Yeah. And how do you imagine those experiences have been internalized within you?
Very deep rejection, kind of bouncing off the previous person for speaking my truth and expressing where I see like injustices on both sides of the family. On my dad's side, I have not been allowed to speak to my younger siblings. They were like 2 through 10 when this happened. Now they're like entering their late teens, and I haven't gotten to speak to them in years. And on the mom's side, my bio mom has pitted everybody against me, and I didn't get to say goodbye to a family member that died because she took control of the whole situation. So yeah, it's manifested in quite a few ways.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Yeah. Cheryl, did you have something?
Yes. When I do express myself in the way I want to express myself, it's not accepted. I get punished for it. And I remember expressing myself as a kid at this one point and getting slapped across the face for it. So from that point, I shut down. But now that I'm expressing myself again, I'm still being punished for it by being shut down in one way or another.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. And that's, that's the risk that I was talking about, right? How does it get received? And then what do we do with that?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So Janine says she was excluded for her spirituality and her awareness, and she just continued to do that. It's kind of what you were saying, Tisha, your your view versus your pastor father's view, and can he accept that? Yeah. And Laurie says feeling excluded for being a single older woman, also for disabilities and not able to participate in certain activities, so that leaves her feeling limited, and it's hard to be close. And Jack says, I exclude myself through my fears and disappointments. Yeah. 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 Morningstar says, I learned that to show up as the mystic I have always been, I had to hide. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of self-protection that we do, that closes us off from from the connected closeness that we want in relationship. Yeah. So let's take a pause. Let's see where we need to go today. So I'm going to tap into the group field and see what is needed for this session. And so what's needed here is something from orientation, problems into opportunities, an intention for a new possibility. There's a repatterning that's needed. There's a modality that we need to do. So there's something that we can do to shift these patterns. And what's needed is something from spiral up. So I'm just going down a list of options here. Ray says, I was excluded for refusing to participate in the soap opera level of dealing with my mother's passing. Yeah. So the drama. So we need something from inner cultivation, family systems 1. Yeah. So we're going to work with the family system, and the modality that's needed here is something from A through E, F, G, H, I through L, something from M. So this is giving and taking with balance. And we'll see what we need here. There's a few options. It's number 1, number 2. So this is assuming responsibility for the negative that we gave in a relationship. So this is looking at how we kind of participate in the pattern and what we can do to change the pattern. So in every relationship, there's a give and take, and there's a need to balance what we give and what we receive. And when the balance is broken, a need to compensate arises, whether for beneficial things or for harmful things. And so the purpose of this modality is to assume responsibility for the negative that we gave in a relationship. So let's see what's needed here. And so it's best for one person to sort of be the voice of the group. No. Okay. So we're going to do this as a group. Yeah. Okay. And so what I want you to do is take a pause. And just center within yourself. And in what relationship, to whom have you given something negative? And you can think about, these relationships where you felt excluded even. And would anybody like to share what's come up for you in terms of identifying the negative that you may have given in a relationship?
I could do that.
Great, thank you.
So I met this person who's the same age, who's spiritual, just seemed like the perfect person for me to share a relationship with. I don't know if she's bisexual, but I watched myself sabotaged by doing a family portrait and not texting exactly that was included. And when her and her daughter came to look at the photographs, there was this negative energy that I created because I thought I was going to give them all the images, and I just told them I was going to give them 3. And it was a big upset, and it's affected the relationship. And now I don't really talk to her, and I feel like I was too much, and now I'm backing off.
Yeah. And so the negative was not to be fully forthcoming?
Um, I told her 3 times about the agreement, and she didn't remember, so I think I just needed to text her so it was loud and clear before they came over what I was doing, because it created a great upset in my office when they thought they were getting all the images, but I was just offering them 3.
Ah, right. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so there was a lack of clarity there in terms of the expectations.
Yeah, huge. And so I feel like I put a wedge in my relationship because of that. I was trying to give.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that sabotage aspect. You try to give and do something on the positive and it gets flipped around so that it's a negative. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I do that a lot in my life, and I really don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So that sabotage pattern. Good. Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Yeah. Janine says unwillingness to let people in and receive from others. Yeah. 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 And that is that protective stance of not being able to receive from others really is a negative, because in mutual relationships there's that give and take. Sometimes it's really a gift to be able to give to someone, and it's really a gift to be able to have what you're offering be received with openness and grace. And when we don't receive, we deprive the other person of being really fully giving their gifts, right? So thank you, Janine. That's very important. Yeah. And Teresa said I had a jealousy issues, thinking that I wasn't good enough. Yeah. Yeah. And so think about how might that have translated into a negative for the other person. So, for myself, when I get self-conscious in relationship, it's like there's a block that comes down that I'm not really able to be present in the moment with the other person and receive them, because I'm all focused on my awkward insecurities, Yeah. Yeah. And Morningstar says, judging them for excluding me and not recognizing that I was excluding myself. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. So, Jax, you have your hand up, and then Tisha.
Yeah, so for me, Liz, the negative that I gave was expectation, disappointment, anger, and resentment. When I didn't get those expectations met, and then also taking for granted, I think, what was given, and not fully appreciating that
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
receiving that.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And, our disappointment can be a heavy weight for the other person, to sort of live under the weight of that disappointment. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. Tisha.
Mine was like a relationship from like my teenage years. When I was homeless, I ended up entering a relationship, but because I'd been homeless and not been supported and been kind of doing everything by myself, I wasn't able to receive the love that the person had to offer me. Like, they would help me out with bills, and they gave me a place to stay, and like there was love there between us, but I went out and sabotaged by cheating and being dishonest and not being where I said I would be, just because I didn't feel worthy enough to receive that person's love and gifts. And so there's always been a sense of atonement for that over my lifetime since then.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's sabotage again, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you. So let's do this modality here. Let's see here. Oh, Morningstar, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just learned how to do that. What I've noticed is that a large portion of my life, I felt excluded, indifferent, and didn't realize that part of that was me hiding out. And then my granddaughter said to me not too long ago, Nana, you were there, but you weren't there.
Mm.
And so my perception is that when you are not showing up with your, when you're not showing up in your family, or it's easy to show up with people like you, we're on the same page, it's so simple. I didn't turn my phone off. It's easy to show up with people that I feel common with. It's my extended family, and the hurt and disappointment that they don't welcome me like I think I would like to be. And recognizing that in that shutting off and showing up, but not quite showing up and so on, there's an implied criticism of them that must always be there, that they aren't going, what's wrong with Nana? They're going, what's wrong with me? That I don't get the reaction that. So it's in the work I've been doing since these last months with you, is a feeling that a lot of the responsibility for where it is, exclusion and the loneliness, sits here. And if I can take care of that, it might change everything in the whole family.
Exactly. Yeah. Beautifully well said. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And again, those expectations and what we expect, and then the disappointment for the unspoken expectations, rather than being fully present and allowing the other person to be who they are in the relationship, just as we would like to be received for who we are. Yeah. Good. Thank you. So now let's see here what we're going to do. So now that you've identified the relationship and you have an idea of what the negative that you gave might be, tune in, and you can imagine, see, or feel the other person. You can visualize them. And in a symbolic way, imagine, visualize, or feel the negative that you gave in that relationship. And you can imagine it in the other person's body or in any other part of them, their energy field. Just notice where you're sensing this negative burden that you've given in the relationship. And Carly, you say, but what if you're in an abusive relationship? All I can give is empathy over time. And I would say, if you're in an abusive relationship, perhaps the negative that you're giving is your complicity. It may be that just allowing the abuse and staying in the relationship is a negative. Certainly it's a negative for you, but also for the other person. And I would say abusive relationships are never okay. And it's the first order of business is to take care of yourself and set the boundary. And that most likely would include ending the relationship. And so notice where in the other person's body that negative burden that you've given is held. And now imagine or visualize this negative load is coming back lovingly to you. And you can take it back and receive it with responsibility and humility. Knowing that it's yours to carry, not the other person's. And now you say to the other person, and you can say this out loud. You say, I gave you all of this. And now I want to assume my responsibility. I do not want to be in debt with you. So I take it back. I assume my responsibility. And I leave you yours. Now we can be in peace. And now feel, imagine, or visualize how you both feel complete and free and at peace. And now, if you like, you can transform this burden into something positive. It can be transformed creatively into a symbol of responsibility. You can make it a color, a shape, a light, whatever comes up for you. And you can take this image or symbol of your personal responsibility and you can place it somewhere in your body where it feels right for you. And now you can tune in and ask, how could you compensate this person? What could you do? What could you give now? And you could do this, it could be an actual concrete action that you take, or it could be something symbolic, a visualization. you could create an image or a symbol representing the compensation. And imagine yourself or visualize yourself giving this positive symbol to the other person in the place of that negative burden that you took back. And now feel, imagine, or visualize how the energy is now balanced. And feel that equilibrium and that peace within yourself. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes, come back into the here and now. Good, good. And how was that for you? Would anybody like to share your experience?
It brought up pain for me. I had an emotional release of pain, hurt.
Yeah, yeah. And where were you holding the pain?
My heart,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how does it feel now?
much clearer.
Good, good. Yeah. Thank you. And so it's interesting when we explore these patterns and we think about the excluded family member and how we may have been excluded. But yet, if we go a step deeper, we can look at, well, what was our role? And how do we either exclude ourselves or even give negative to the other person? And then to be able to really delve into that and acknowledge it and actually take it back and transform it into personal responsibility is very freeing. So good job, everybody. Yeah. And Morningstar, did you have something? I see your hand is raised. Oh, you're muted.
I've been doing some Ho'oponopono for a while, and that keeps directing me back to me no matter what I'm thinking is happening. But this work got me to see places where, when it says, when I say in the prayer, I assume full responsibility for myself in the situation, this made me aware of where some of those responsibilities sit. And part of what I saw when you said, what can you give back, is keep doing the Ho'oponopono, keep cleaning for the whole family. And maybe everybody will find that their piece of this pattern gets erased. And wouldn't that be lovely?
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, and in that deeper awareness of the more specifics, you can really fine tune the release of the pattern. So that's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, good, good. So there's anything more that's needed from the session? No, the session's complete. Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. Yeah. And so it's always amazing to me where these sessions go and how these patterns are held and how good it feels to start to release them. And I'd like to invite you to continue with this work. I work with people in small groups and on one-on-one as well. And I have a small group forming very soon for people who are in relationship, who would like to continue to explore and identify and transform these patterns of how we cut ourselves off from connection and intimacy in close relationship. And so if you would like to get more information, you can reach out. You can email me at et@liztobin.com. I'll stick it in the, put it in the chat. Great. So thank you, everybody. Wonderful. So I will see you next week, and I'm happy to stay on the line and answer any questions, or if anybody has anything else you'd like to share, that is welcome as well. Thank you. There we go. Stop the recording.